Breer, where have you been so far? What camps?
So this will be my 11th camp. I did the five in LA, which are the Rams, the Chargers, the Cowboys, the Raiders, and the Saints, and then Arizona, Seattle, San Francisco, Denver, Green Bay. I think that's 10.
Very
Yeah, so I've been to
impressive.
10 so far. Yeah.
All right, so let's start with the Chargers. Herbert's got plantar fasciitis, which is very
Yeah.
painful. And you were
Mhm.
out there. Jim Harbaugh is the new coach out there. What were your feelings about that camp? What's it like dealing? Did you deal with Jim Harbaugh at all?
Yeah, I did. I did. I had a good conversation with him. I almost feel like we maybe like part of the whole thing, like when he was with the Niners, maybe we misunderstood him a little bit. The guy just genuinely loves his job, and is he weird and quirky? Yeah, but I think that that's like where he connects with the players the most and how he's able to get the most out of the players, and so um, I you can definitely see where he is going to build the same thing that he built everywhere else he's been. In fact, so there's a video I did up. I'm not plugging it. I'm just explaining it to you. But
You
like, there's a
can
video I
plug
did
things,
with.
Bert. You're doing an hour of the show. You can plug things. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we did. I had like my time. Some of my time with Harbaugh's on video there, and if you guys look in the back of the video, you can see players doing what the. Do you guys know what a flip sled is? It's a relatively new thing.
No, I don't.
Okay, so it's basically like this big weighted sled that they flip. It's like the same concept as flipping a tire,
Okay,
like
yeah.
flipping. So after this 2 hour practice, which was pretty fast paced for the first practice of the year without pads on, right behind us in our shot, you see players doing the flip sleds. And so they're doing flip sleds for a half hour after practice. So you kind of get an idea of what they're trying to build, which is the exact same thing they built everywhere else. And honestly, like I think there's something to be said for that. Like in today's NFL, where every defense seems like it's geared to stop Patrick Mahomes, that you have, this team that's just built like it's 25 years ago. And I think it worked. It's worked for Jim's brother in Baltimore. It's worked to some degree here in Detroit, right, with the Lions.
Hmm.
Just the way teams are built now, those types of teams, the Harbaugh type of team is very difficult to deal with because uh, you know, quite frankly, teams aren't used to seeing it.
Okay. And he talks to you like a normal human being because I saw some footage of him talking to players when he was at Michigan, and
Yeah.
him talking to guys, and it was very odd. And I don't even know if he knew he was being taped.
He's just nuts.
He didn't
Yeah.
seem he doesn't seem odd to you. He just seems okay.
Nuts.
No, he is odd. I'm not saying he's not odd.
Okay.
He's definitely different. No, I'm not saying he's not odd. Like maybe the best. So, maybe the best example of what it was like being out there. So, they have this beautiful new facility that they just opened, the Chargers. Right, it's right by the airport in LA. I think it was $250 million for them to build it, and so it's in El Segundo, and the first day of camp they do this big ribbon cutting ceremony, right? Like so they bring out the mayor, the fire chief, the police chief, like all of these people from the city. And so first day camp, Jim's walking out of the building with a guy from the Chargers I know, and so like the guys explained to him like who the people are. It's like, okay, like so you're gonna go over there, you're gonna talk to the mayor, you're gonna talk to the police chief, you're gonna talk to the fire chief. Just they're really excited to meet you. Just make a little conversation with them, whatever. And then they're gonna do the ribbon cutting, the photo op, and that'll be that. And Jim looks at the guy and says, "You want me to bring the whole team over?" And he's like, "No, Jim, you don't really need to do that. Don't worry about it." So then Jim goes over and he talks to all those people. And then they get ready for the photo op where they're putting up the ribbon, or they're pulling up the ribbon. And all of a sudden you hear four loud whistles. And Jim is just like waving everybody over like he's waving somebody home from third base, right? And before you know it, there are 90 football players in this photo op with the mayor and all these other people who are stunned by it. I brought it up to somebody else who knows him really well on my camp trip a couple days later, and he goes, "Yep, that's Jim. You give him a choice between A and B, and he's going to choose F." So definitely a little bit of a different look at that camp.
George Allen was a great NFL coach, but he couldn't work with ownership. He was always combative with ownership. He would, for someone who was successful as he was, he would get fired. And
Yep.
Art Modell was talking about George Allen. He said he just couldn't. He was a brilliant mind, but he just couldn't cooperate. Is that what you see with Jim Harbaugh? Kind of is the same thing. He's a great coach, but there's something about him.
This is going to be really interesting because he did clash with his AD some at Michigan, right? Like, and obviously there's the clash with ownership at San Francisco. I think the problem in both those places is that maybe he didn't have things set up quite the way that he wanted them to be set up. Like in San Francisco, he inherited the general manager, he inherited the front office. Like that wasn't really those people weren't really from, like his, family tree, so to speak. Michigan, same thing. Like you're inheriting a lot of, big money donors, the AD, all of these people that you really like has sort of had a shotgun marriage with, right? Like the difference with the Chargers is that like they basically let him bring in whoever he wanted. So the GM is this guy, Joe Ortiz, who is from Baltimore, was the number 2 guy under the general manager in Baltimore that Jim knows through John. And then that GM built out the scouting department with more people who have Baltimore background, and the coaching staff is all his. And so he brought in the strength coach. The strength coach came with him from Michigan. So I would just say, like, because there's less of like that shotgun marriage element, way less of it than there was at either San Francisco or Michigan, maybe this has a better chance to work long term. And he's also older, so I think the lessons of what's happened the last couple of times probably serve him too.
All right, and out of those West Coast teams, do you see a difference in the camps? Like,
yeah,
you do.
Camps are more physical now than they have in the last few years. I think all the stuff about sports science, that's swung back around. Like, you had a point where like teams were practicing for like 75 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think like there are a lot of coaches who felt like the athletic training staff got too much control of things. And like maybe the GPS data and all the tracking of it had gotten out of control to the point where it was costing teams during the season. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone in Denver about this, and they have a really difficult training camp with Sean Payton, right? He runs things in like a very Bill Parcells type of way. 2.5-hour practice when I was there with gassers at the end of it. He what the guys there told me was, and I talked to Sean about this too, was like last year, like a couple of years ago when they did things that way, they led the league in injury time missed, right? And then last year, after having a much more difficult camp, they had much fewer injuries. Now you might lose a guy or two in camp because of it, but you're going to be better off long term because of it. And if you look like all this stuff really relates back to who's winning. Look at the 4 teams that were the Final Four: Baltimore with John Harbaugh, Kansas City with Andy Reid. Andy Reid runs a really difficult camp. Detroit with Dan Campbell, and then San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan. Like those teams, I would say, for those who don't know, those teams all hit a lot in camp. Those teams all have 2.5-hour practices in camp. And so I think some of that stuff has swung back around. And then, I guess as far as my impressions from the West Coast.
Let's save those because we have to break. And I'll tell you that this is swinging, if it is swinging back to contact, even players, ex-players we've talked to have said that you have to get hit.
You know what I'm saying, though? Like,
yeah, I definitely know what you're saying.
They feel like these teams feel like people see it as dangerous because they might lose 2 or 3 or 4 players in camp, but the guys who make it through it are better prepared for the season. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh, believe me, I think there's something to that at every level. I think there's something to do that at the high school level. I've seen it. I think there's something. I think there is something to hitting and getting that out of the way in a structured environment that I think does prepare you for the season, even if you've been playing your football your whole life.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.